Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Kevin Kelton, a well-intentioned elderly man with a bad memory, but I do remember that I'm joined on the mic tonight by DJ McGuire.
That's right, and my memory's so bad I forgot my comic throw-in line. I'm just from Hampton Roads, Virginia tonight.
And Rebecca Kushmeider.
Hello, everyone. I would like you all to know that I was not singing along with the halftime show during tonight's Super Bowl, but I did sing along to the ad for the movie version of the musical Wicked. And here I am in Kensington, Maryland.
And Greg Matusak.
Common sense liberal from Cincinnati, Ohio, who unfortunately was able to watch any of the Super Bowl, but I'm really hoping Taylor Swift scored at least one touchdown. Is this how this works? Or
I would actually argue that she did.
Really?
We'll get to that later.
Oh, that's awesome.
We'll get to that later. But this week, we have a wide range of topics to cover. We're going to cover a lot more than just politics this week. But we're going to start with politics because it was such a big week in the political arena, especially with Trump and his comments about NATO and the implications for Putin and Russia. DJ, I'm going to throw to you. You call this the GOP's two daddies.
That's right. The Republicans have two daddies, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. A couple nights ago, Donald Trump got on the stage and said he had a meeting with somebody. The meeting probably didn't happen.
No, they actually named the person today, and I can't tell you who it is, but it's a woman leader of a NATO country.
Okay, well, in any event, he basically said no. He said he would not come to the country's aid if they were invaded. In fact, he would let Russia do whatever they wanted because that NATO ally didn't, quote, pay us, which, one, is a confused version of the NATO promise to all countries to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. But even worse than that, every country that actually borders Russia, Belarus, or Ukraine has made that mark of spending 2% of their GDP on defense. So Trump is literally giving Russia permission to go through Poland, Romania, or the Baltics, so long as they get to a Denmark or a Germany or another place that has been lax on their NATO defense commitment. It was absolutely terrible. It finally got some cut through over the weekend in the press. We are now all realizing that if Donald Trump sees Russia invading one of our allies, he'll take Russia's side.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I mean, I think that's something DJ's been saying since about 2015, if I had to guess. And that's 2 years before I met you, DJ. So that's how loud you were talking. The way he is misconstruing what membership in NATO entails and making it sound like it's a dues-paying organization. I don't know if that is willful ignorance that he is using to sort of dumb this issue down for his base, or if he really, after 4 years of serving as president, doesn't understand what the responsibilities of NATO membership are. But saying things like that are so factually wrong is troubling because it reveals that he is still bad at foreign policy, and also his thesis statement that it's okay to let Russia attack NATO members if they haven't met this fairly arbitrary standard that they don't need to meet until this year under the treaty, the latest agreements, is even more upsetting. He's just really willing to throw most of Europe to the wolves, and the wolves, by the wolves I mean Vladimir Putin.
And we know Putin has this on his mind. In a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, I know you guys all watch that on the Twitter or whatever the kids are watching TV on now.
The kids are not watching Tucker Carlson on the Twitter. No one is watching Tucker Carlson on the Twitter. And that's part of Tucker Carlson's problem. And it's why he is escalating his stunts.
But there's things that we should have been watching, because at one point Vladimir Putin blamed Poland for Hitler's decision to invade, claiming that Warsaw went too far by balking at the annexation of part of its territories. I mean...
Yeah, that Poland
that's
just
crazy.
being
It's
there,
Poland.
having land, asking
Oh my
for
goodness.
it.
They were asking... Did you see how Poland was dressed?
I know, it looked exactly like Poland.
Oh my goodness. I think, yeah. Come on.
I mean,
Yeah,
if I had seen Poland dressed like that, I certainly would have catcalled, if not invaded.
I'm going to jump in because I see this very different than you guys. Probably, actually, when I tell you my thesis, you're going to probably agree with me. I don't think this is about Donald Trump not understanding the nuance of how important NATO is to Eastern Europe. I think it's just the opposite. I think he does understand. To me, this is all about the election. Donald Trump is saying to Putin, I will give you Ukraine. You give me as much help as you can into the election. Help me get elected, and the world is your oyster. This is a quid pro quo. It is traitorous. I can't believe he's doing it, and yet he seems ready to do it.
Oh, Kevin, you were right. I totally agree with you.
It says something about who Trump is, that Kevin can say that, and the rest of us are like, well, yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Trump has normalized the end of American independence. Let's just sit back and shudder at that, please.
I'd be interested to know if Donald Trump thinks that Putin would allow him to continue running golf courses in Scotland if Russia was running Scotland.
It's been a long week, but we should note that the Senate is slowly crawling forward on a bill to aid Ukraine. It should pass the Senate sometime Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we will see if we have a House of Representatives or a Dacha of Representatives.
Oh, I know the answer to that one. I know that one, DJ. I know that one. It's a Dacha, which is Russian for house.
And that is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. There is talk of using a discharge petition to force everybody's hand.
If they vote it down, then we can call our next podcast the Dacha Gotcha.
Yes, indeed we can. And speaking of gotchas, I don't think anyone has ever been so badly hurt by not getting prosecuted as Joe Biden was for about 24 hours before Donald Trump reminded us all that he is much crazier.
Well, Hillary Clinton, but go on.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Clinton's damage was a bit longer lasting. The special counsel investigating Joe Biden's classified materials put the report. They said Mr. Biden basically took back his personal notes and a lot of Afghanistan-related documents. Said basically he thought he held them willfully, but there wasn't a whole lot of evidence to show that. And for some reason, the special prosecutor spent all this bandwidth talking about Joe Biden's memory problems. He couldn't remember this. He couldn't remember that. So, of course, how could anyone prove in a court of law that he remembered these documents? And suddenly, just about everybody who criticized Joe Biden and Joe Biden's memory started making mistakes of their own. Nikki Haley, for example, said 9/11 happened on September 10th. Trump himself called Viktor Orban the president of Turkey when he actually runs Hungary.
Was this also when Trump said that 9/11 was 7/11?
Yes. That happened this week.
That was
This
fun.
is all in the last 48 hours?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah.
Trump also said if Biden gets elected, Pennsylvania will disappear. They'll change its name.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, he said that Biden wants to change the name of Pennsylvania.
To what? What are we changing it to? Delaware East? Delaware
East
West?
Delaware. I'm behind that because Pennsylvania is very difficult for me to spell. So we need more like New Yorks, 4-letter word states like Ohio. How great is or Iowa? Easy. Let's keep this easy for those of us who can't spell.
Do you know the origin of this craziness that Donald Trump... DJ, do you know the origin of it? I do.
Hepatitis? Chlamydia.
Syphilis.
Syphilis.
It's syphilis.
That was it.
In a major park, I believe it's in Philadelphia. I think it's called William Penn Park or something like that. And there's a statue of William Penn in the park. Well, for some reason, someone in the Biden administration or someone in government came up with an idea that for PC reasons, they should remove that statute. Don't ask me why. There was some pushback from people in Pennsylvania. It very quickly got scuttled. It was a bad idea that they very quickly realized was a bad idea. And they said, no, we're not doing that. The statue is still there. But because he was going to remove a statue of William Penn, Trump used his Trump logic to say he wants to change the name of Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
I want to circle back to the memory issue because something that really bothered me, whenever something like this happens, you have 72 hours or more, actually now I think we're into the fourth day, of experts on every single TV station, cable, broadcast, ESPN. Everybody is opining on what Biden did when he mentioned that the president of Egypt was actually the president of Mexico. And they think that he doesn't know the difference between the two countries. He doesn't know the difference between the two world leaders. That is not what happened. And I can't believe no one that I've seen has made this very simple point. Joe Biden is dealing with two very difficult border issues simultaneously. One is the border of Gaza and Egypt, and the other one is the Mexico-U.S. border. And it was in that context that he mixed up the two countries. It's not that he doesn't know who the president of Egypt is. He simply meant to say the border of Egypt, and he said the border of Mexico because they're both on his mind. And based on that, people are trying to say that he's not fit to be president of the United States. Do we remember how many mental screw-ups Donald Trump has made just in the last 2 months? He called Nancy Pelosi Nikki Haley. I think that's a little worse than screwing up the border of Mexico and the border of Egypt.
I mean, as I said on Twitter about this issue, the questions that Biden got confused about, the dates and what was in boxes that were packed in 2017 and what have you. I can't remember where I put my car keys. Like, ask me what year my husband and I got married, and I have to count on my fingers.
Of course, it was a total hit job. You just don't do that to someone. It
was the things he was saying were unnecessary. He was editorializing in ways that were unnecessary to the investigation.
And mean-spirited.
Yeah, it was mean-spirited. And it was a gift to Trump. It was the one issue that Biden is truly weak on, is his age and his mental capacity related to his age. And Robert Hur just decided that the thing to do was to make that more of an issue. And the only thing I can say is I'm glad it happened in February and not October.
Very good point.
Well, the other thing is, Biden is the Democratic nominee for president, or presumptive nominee for president. Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee for president. They're both old. They both, occasionally miss a word. They occasionally forget a fact. Joe Biden is a well-intentioned public servant who wants us all to live to the end of this decade. The same cannot be said for Donald Trump.
What was Jimmy Kimmel's line? You may think that Alfred is a bit too old to run the Batcave, but that doesn't mean you hand it over to the Joker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the fundamental facts about these two men remain consistent. Donald Trump fucking sucks, and voting for him is a very, very bad idea.
And there's one additional thing I want to mention for folks who are looking or asking or screaming at the Democratic Party to replace Joe Biden. We have seen 7 non-incumbent presidents run under the incumbent party's banner since World War II. 6 of them have failed. Only one, George H.W. Bush, succeeded in 1988, and there's a reason for that. Anytime you run as the presidential nominee of the incumbent party, you get all of that incumbent's negatives and none of his positives. Every negative that Joe Biden has from his record or from the perceptions of his record will be transferred to whatever nominee you think is going to replace him. And none of the positives, none of his support among black women, his ability to win over older Americans better than any other Democrat, his sense of empathy. All of those things are gone if you go with a Gavin Newsom or a Jared Polis or Hochul from New York or whoever it is, or even a Gretchen Whitmer. The only other real alternative, even to getting the nomination, as history shows us, would be Kamala Harris. And Democrats have made it abundantly clear over and over again they prefer Joe Biden to Kamala Harris, and they're showing it again.
Well, political and philosophical barriers aside, there's also a practical barrier. No one could get on the ballots because the ballot deadlines had passed. The Maryland primary is one of the last primaries. You know when our get on the ballot deadline was? 2 days ago.
In reality, if something were to happen or if he were to drop out, they would have an open convention, basically.
Yeah, they would have an open convention. But the point is, everyone who's saying, I think someone's going to run now. No, they're not going to run because they can't get on a ballot.
Right. Right.
You can't, like, your paperwork deadline is passed. You can't get on. Joe Biden is alive and kicking and on all the ballots. And he filed the paperwork and he's good to go. But you can't get on a ballot you certainly can't be on a ballot by Super Tuesday. Forget the states that we've already had primaries in where he's won resoundingly. It's just, it's stupid. Anybody who's saying that is living in fantasy world.
The other thing I don't understand is people keep saying, like, why don't the Democrats do something? Why doesn't the party do something?
We did. We nominated Joe Biden.
Well, yes, that's true. I agree with you. But there's this myth that there's a small group of people, the cigar smoking, smoke-filled room that can get together and say, you know what? Joe doesn't have it this year. We got to pull the plug on him and go with Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer. It doesn't exist. That mechanism does not exist. There is no party that could just push out an incumbent president.
Well, unfortunately, old nonsense dies hard. You would think what the Republicans went through would show everybody that no, party leadership does not control the voters the way you think it does. But we are living in a world where too many people think that a half dozen rich people can control the political turn of the United States, when in reality, the United States body politic is controlled by angry, crazy, small donors in the Republican Party and relatively sober college graduate voters in the Democratic Party. It's much easier to hide behind the cynicism of, it's just a half dozen rich people who decide everything. And that simply is not true.
And basically what you're saying is there is not an autocrat waiting to save democracy from itself.
Correct.
Shall we turn to what DJ has labeled Throw Up Thursday instead of Throwback Thursday?
I was throwing back drinks. I don't know. Wait.
Yes, we've talked a bit about the Her memo. That was one of the reasons I called it Throw Up Thursday. The other one was the Supreme Court basically dropped broad hints that they were not going to let Colorado keep Trump off the ballot.
Okay, and I'm gonna nerd myself into next nerddom here. I listened to that argument as it was happening to give you an idea of how committed to my nerddom I am. I hopped off a horse at the moment that those arguments started. I know. Can you believe it, Greg? And immediately popped earbuds in and started streaming it. I was walking around a barn listening to Supreme Court arguments. So picture that, if you will. And I'm going to say that I don't think the Supreme Court is wrong to shut down this effort. And I'm going to tell you why. It's a different slippery slope or Pandora's box. I feel like Pandora's box is the slippery slope of 2024. a different version of that, because what they were talking about with the disunanimity or the disuniformity of state regulations and how they would embrace or not embrace the 14th Amendment, with some states throwing one candidate off and some states throwing another candidate off. What I foresaw is if we were to give blanket permission to states to implement the 14th Amendment as they see fit, using their own state definitions of an insurrection, it would become a form of partisan gerrymandering. Because what you would have is some state legislatures or state secretaries of state saying, oh, well, what Joe Biden and the entire Democratic delegation from our state is doing in regards to the border is tantamount to insurrection. Therefore, they are all disqualified from the ballot under the 14th Amendment, and you have no Democrats running at all, or vice versa. And that is not what we want. And that has been my concern about the Colorado issue from the beginning, is that there is no burden of proof and no due process to affirmatively define what participation in an insurrection looks like. And I know it's like porn, you know it when you see it. But I think the Supreme Court is correct in suggesting that there needs to be something a little better prescribed before making these rulings.
I think everybody knows that it's probably going to be an 8-1 or a 9-0 decision in favor of Trump. But I have to confess, I was a little disappointed in Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was pushing this theory that there's a difference between an office holder and an officer of the United States.
It was the idea of being an officer under the Constitution or office of the Constitution. Yeah. And there was a lot of and under, and I was like, I think that's a continuity issue, guys. I don't think that was a deliberate verbiage choice.
I totally agree. It makes no sense. There's two reasons that I think that, as much as I like her, I think that she seems to have been wrong in her logic. First of all, if you want to try to get into the framers' heads, it makes no sense that they would want to keep a rebel soldier from becoming a congressperson, but they would allow Jefferson Davis or Stonewall Jackson to be president of the United States based on her reading of the Constitution. But the other thing, let me put it this way. You have a company. Greg, what do you generally call the head of the company?
The CEO or the president?
The CEO. And what does CEO stand for?
Chief Executive Officer?
That's right. And so we have an executive branch. You would say that the president is the chief executive of the branch, He is the chief executive officer of the branch. So to say that he's not an officer of the United States is ridiculous.
Oh, Greg was raising his hand very politely.
You got it right, Greg. What do you want? You're getting an A+ on today's podcast.
Gold star, Greg.
Greg is very polite. Greg raised his hand. Yeah. I have a different take, and it's a little more base, but it's true. I had a discussion with a friend of mine who was just seething at the thought of Trump being thrown off, just angry. And the whole thing, I let him talk, and finally said, I agree with you. I hope Trump isn't taken off the ballot either. And he goes, what? And I said, because I honestly believe, and this is a different reason, that Donald Trump is probably the only candidate that Joe Biden can beat at this point. And I'm all in. The more he talks, the worse it gets for him. And I know the polling, but they only poll people who are, over 65 and use a phone. I'm okay with the polls right now. Let's run, Donald, run. I'm like Jenny. Run, Donald, run.
Well, I was thinking drill, baby, drill. Let's drill Donald. I'm all for it.
I should say like Jenny.
Jenny. I'm not a smart man, Jenny.
I'm not a smart man, but I think Kevin, I was sexually molested.
Kevin, you need to take this out in editing. There's absolutely none of our forest
what editing? We don't do any editing. What people get is exactly what we say.
I was surprised that the court didn't because there was another version of punting that the court could have done that I could have understood, where they could have said, we're not going to answer the question of whether it was an insurrection or whether it wasn't, all those other kinds of things. However, there is nothing in the Constitution, even if you think Donald Trump did trigger 14.3. All that says is that he cannot take the office. It doesn't say he can't be nominated. It doesn't say people can't vote for him. It just says he can't take the office. So this really is not a pressing issue. I mean, I think this is what the court could have done. I don't think they will. They could say, look, this is not a pressing issue until a majority of electors in the Electoral College actually vote for Donald John Trump. And then we have to ask ourselves, okay, is he actually eligible to serve? Is he able to serve? Or is he unable to serve because of 14.3 and his vice president takes the job? That actually could have been something they did. That could have been an off-ramp that they wanted. They could have taken. It looks like they're going to choose not to take it, and I think that's dangerous because I don't think the framers of the 14th Amendment intended for Congress to define insurrection every single time.
I agree.
They gave Congress the ability to remove the insurrection label from someone with a 2/3 vote and say, okay, this person is pardoned. But they did not give the Congress the power to define what an insurrection was. And I think that is dangerous.
Now, we did have a big football game this week. Two people who were not in it, however, did on Sunday fumble the ball big time. Chris Christie, and actually it was a week or so earlier than that, John Bolton both made huge fumbles on television regarding the upcoming presidential election, because both of them went on television to say Donald Trump is in no way, shape, or form competent or qualified or trustworthy to become the president of the United States once again. But when given the opportunity to say, which means that, of course, we must support Joe Biden, they both refused to say those words. They can't do it. And I do not understand what somebody like Chris Christie and John Bolton think they're accomplishing when they go on TV and say in absolute no uncertain terms, Donald Trump would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to this country, but so would Joe Biden.
No, because they haven't looked at the ballot deadlines to know that nobody else can file to run against him, and Nikki Haley lost to none of the above in Nevada.
Oh, I don't know about that.
And Chris Christie was talking about no labels when he still thought Larry Hogan might be their nominee. Now that he's running for the United States Senate, that whole thing blows up.
No, Chris Christie thinks that he might be the nominee. There's talk of Chris Christie possibly being the nominee. They'll come up with someone.
Yeah, Chris Christie is, I think, looking down the road, and he realizes if he's a Republican, and he was on, I want to say Meet the Press this morning, or one of the shows, and he literally said, I'm a Republican. I'll always be a Republican, and I'm trying to change the party from within. He will lose all, if he hasn't already, Republican credibility if he says he'd support a Democratic president. What was Reagan's 11th commandment? Don't talk bad about your own party, ever. And yeah, I'm quoting Reagan here.
But what does Chris Christie think his future is? The guy, like, his best plan is to get a book deal.
No, he might run for on the no labels ticket. I don't think they would nominate him, but he might.
I think the rumors I've heard is that whatever's going on with no labels is not good, and they're not actually organized to get on ballots. Again, we're hitting filing deadlines, and what it takes to be able to get on ballots. I'm not sure no labels is viable.
Here, look, the second biggest name for no labels was Larry Hogan. Sorry, Rebecca. And the fact that he has chosen not only to abandon a presidential run, but to actually abandon no labels and run as a Republican for the United States Senate in a state that is so blue, your car could turn azure as it crosses into it.
My car actually is blue. I'm not sure if it was when I bought it, but it's blue now.
That tells you everything you need to know about how, quote, organized, unquote, no labels is. When even a guy like Larry Hogan is saying, you know what, I would rather stay a Republican and run for the United States Senate in a state I have no shot of winning in.
Well, another thing is no labels. Someone in no labels very early on said, we are not going to help Donald Trump get elected.
Yeah, but they are going to help him.
They are.
Everyone knows that any third-party candidate is going to hurt Joe Biden. I'm sorry, I do not buy this argument.
Right, which is why no labels does not have an actual candidate and may not have an actual candidate.
They will.
They are not. I don't think they will. I think they're at the point where they are waiting too long. We've got RFK Jr. buying Super Bowl ads. That's where the third party world is right now.
That's what I was just going to bring up. Did you guys see that?
That was the stupidest. My kids were like, "Wait, Kennedy? Isn't he dead?"
Are you kidding? That was a great ad.
No, that ad.
It really
that
wasn't.
ad struck home only for those of us who remember it. And that's
Well, first of all, nobody remembers it. I'm older than all of you, and I don't remember the 1960 campaign. But go ahead.
my point is that sort of Kennedy vibe, which I'm sure you do remember at least a little, hearing it from your parents, as I heard it from my parents growing up. Nobody actually remembers it firsthand, but there's some of us who still remember the Kennedy vibe secondhand. Kevin, we were the only ones who would have felt any sort of energy from that advertisement. The average Gen Z and younger millennial voter probably admires Dwight D. Eisenhower more than John F. Kennedy these days. I know. It's bizarre. Trust me.
And they don't know who RFK was.
That's true. They have no idea who RFK is.
DJ, listen, I know that somehow Ike has made some kind of a comeback in the contemporary history mindset, but what makes you think that they don't know the legend of John F. Kennedy?
That's not what I said.
Okay.
I didn't say they don't know who John F. Kennedy is. What I said was that they admire Dwight Eisenhower more than they admire John F. Kennedy.
What really? But why? What makes you say that?
Because to folks who are that far...
Because they're contrary little twists?
Well, not just that. To folks for whom 1963 was 30 to 40 years before they were born, the luster of Camelot means absolutely nothing to them. Zip, zero, nada. They will look at what the Republican Party was in the 1950s, a party that was more circumspect on defense spending. I would have disagreed with them on that, by the way. A party that was far more liberal on cultural issues than it is today. In fact, a party that was more supported by women than the Democrats because it was considered the party of less machismo. And they would look at Eisenhower's second term and Eisenhower's second term policies. They would apparently completely forget Operation Wetback. I don't know how that got in the dustbin of history, but it did.
You're assuming they knew what it was, DJ.
Yeah.
You're also assuming I know what it was.
And they would compare it to John F. Kennedy, who from a hard policy perspective did basically nothing outside of a tax reduction that Ronald Reagan used for his economic policy in 1981 and beyond. Voters of that age look at John F. Kennedy and Dwight Eisenhower, and they find more to like in the latter than they do in the former. And all of the energy and all of the youth about John F. Kennedy, none of that matters to them because John F. Kennedy last walked the earth over 60 years ago. And we have to recognize that, as bizarre as that may seem to us.
Someone needs to tell RFK Jr. that.
Okay, so let's turn now to the Super Bowl. We won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but as everybody now knows, the Kansas City Chiefs won in overtime dramatically. Any thoughts on the game, on the ads, on any celebrities that might have been there?
There was an ad for Ridgeline ATVs where everybody in the ad developed a mullet coming in contact with this vehicle, including a bear. And I laughed so hard, my abs hurt. I drove by and the bear got a mullet.
So I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, and this is now the time for me to expound on it. I think Taylor Swift was responsible for Kansas City Chiefs touchdown. I really do.
Which one?
All of them?
No, not all of them. I have been here with you during the overtime touchdown, so that one I did not see. I did see the touchdown in the third quarter after the Chiefs recovered the fumbled punt.
Yeah.
It was a red zone play, and if you'll notice, the actual receiver who caught the ball, number 11, his name eludes me, was on the same side of the field as Travis Kelce, known to just about everybody else as Mr. Swift, Taylor Swift's boyfriend. So they both run routes. Kelce runs in what's called an out route, which means he goes forward a bit and then heads to the sideline by the end zone. The wide receiver, number 11, runs in what's called an in route, goes forward and then goes towards the middle of the field in the end zone. The cornerback is supposed to cover the wide receiver. He didn't. He focused on Kelce, leaving Kelce double-teamed and that receiver wide open.
Interesting.
Oh, that was a clean run into the end zone. I watched that. Yeah.
And I don't think that would have happened if the cornerback or the whole defense didn't have in the back of their mind, oh God, Taylor Swift's in the audience. If Travis Kelce scores a touchdown, it's going to blow the roof off. He's going to be the first target. We got to make sure that Travis Kelce is covered. I think they overcompensated for that. I think they fixated on Travis Kelce, and that's what left the wide receiver open.
Or they're part of the deep state.
Oh, we're all part of the deep state.
I have a top secret clearance. I'm part of the deep state.
I'll be honest. I liked it when Travis Kelce, went up to the plate and pointed his bat to the far end. And said, that's where I'm going to. I actually didn't watch the game. I actually don't know much about football, but I'm pretty sure he hit a home run at that point for Taylor Swift.
I want to ask you guys, since Taylor Swift was nominally a part of the Super Bowl this year, did you guys hear about the fake limo driver?
Yes,
that was sent to pick up Taylor Swift at an airport, I think Las Vegas airport.
Well, she flew into LAX.
Yes,
though.
Yes.
So some media company decided to pull a little prank on people at the airport. They dressed a guy up as a limo driver. They had him holding a Taylor Swift sign by the escalator, as if she was going to come out with the rest of the people on commercial flights. And he was just standing there holding it, just to see people's reactions. And people, they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. It was kind of funny.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, and never mind that she's got a security detail made up completely of former Mossad agents. It's just going to have a limo guy with a sign.
Well, with that, we want to thank everybody for listening. If you like what we do here, please follow us on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. And don't forget to share our podcast link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover the podcast as well. Also, we have a new Substack blog page called MPU Podcast, where we will occasionally drop essays, opinions, and random thoughts between shows. So please look for us there. And as always, we want to thank Alan Keeney for our theme music. And with that, Greg, DJ, Rebecca, any thoughts for the week to come, whether it's a kind of nachos you'll be making up for the Supreme Court decision, whether to stay the case or not, the immunity case, or anything else that's coming up this week?
Yeah, I'm gonna make constipation nachos to really encourage things to stay. The staying.
Ooh.
I'm gonna make nachos.
No, you don't want to stay.
Mostly,
you don't want to stay.
No, oh, you're right. I don't want to stay. I'm gonna make
regular nachos.
I'm gonna make diuretic nachos.
Regular nachos.
Diuretic nachos. I'm gonna go to Taco Bell and really get things flowing.
Okay, well, there's a lawsuit.
Lost another sponsor.